The Pokemon North American International Championships are the second biggest tournament of the entire year, with players coming from all around the globe to compete for money, glory, and their final chance to qualify for the Pokemon World Championships. For me, this is the most important event of my entire season thus far. I already qualified for the World Championships back in February, but there's a lot more at stake here. At the end of the season, the 8 best performing players in North America will get to skip the entire first phase of the World Championships and start competing on the second day of the tournament. Being able to start directly in the second day is a massive advantage. To give you an idea how big this is, only one player has ever managed to win the World Championships after starting in the first day. On top of that, the last 2 times that I had to start in day 1 of Worlds, I failed to make it out, including last year. So for me, Nationals is my final chance to auto-qualify for day 2 of the World Championships. But there's a problem. Despite this being my most consistent season ever, making it past the first day of competition in every regional level event I attended and never finishing worse than 16th place overall, I'm not in the top 8 of North America. Reason being, I was unable to attend either of the 2 other international championships in Europe and Australia. These events are valued many times more than the regional level events I attended, and every other player in contention attended at least one of them, while the majority of them attended both. This puts me at a massive disadvantage, as placing in the top 128 players at an international earns you as many points as a top 8 finish at a regional, with better finishes earning many more points. And so, in order to earn a spot in day 2 of the World Championships, I need to finish 4th place or better. This is an incredibly difficult goal to achieve. Every other top American player will be in attendance, as well as many of the top talent from other regions. But this is also the tournament that I've won more than any other, claiming victory 3 times out of the 10 times I've attended. And in all 3 of those, I needed to finish 4th place or better in order to make day 2 of Worlds. So even though, yeah, it is a very ambitious goal, it's also something that I've done before. Of course, in order to win any tournament, you need to have a good team. If you're not super familiar with competitive Pokemon, basically what you need to know is that a lot of the time spent preparing for tournaments isn't actually about playing the game, it's about deciding which Pokemon to use. There are about 400 Pokemon legal in the current rule set, each with dozens of different moves they can learn and items they can use, not to mention the fact that you can influence their stats to let them do wildly different things. Coming up with a cohesive 6 Pokemon team that works well together and covers all other combinations of 6 that you think you might play against is really challenging, which is why I'm not going to think about it. Or at least I wasn't when our story begins. It's April 14th. 2.5 months before Nationals, and my friends are competing at the European International Tournament. I can't attend because I'm going to a friend's wedding, but a bunch of my friends are going and I really want them to do well. I'm working on a rain team with Pelipper and Palafin that I think has a bunch of potential when I get a message from my friend Yuki. He's got a very unusual team featuring Dondozo, Tinkaton, and Gothitelle. And since he has a Perish mode, he wants me to take a look at his team to see if everything is okay. The team is really cool. Wide Lens Chiyu hits Overheat and Will-O-Wisp far more often. The Flutter is super tanky and can support the team with Icy Wind. Tinkaton and Gothitelle provide 2 fake out supports, and Dondozo has Yawn? I give Yuki my feedback, but something about his team sticks with me. Now, Yawn Dondozo isn't super uncommon by any means, but Yuki had done something that I'd never seen before, pairing Yawn Dondozo with Shadow Tag Gothitelle. Yawn is a move that makes the target drowsy, which causes it to fall asleep at the end of the following turn. Normally, you use this to force a target to switch out, since switching removes the drowsy effect. But Yuki paired Dondozo with Gothitelle, whose Shadow Tag ability prevents the opponent from switching and also can support Dondozo with Fake Out and Heal Pulse. On top of that, Yuki paired Gothitelle with Perish Song Fluttermane, allowing him to make use of the Perish Trap strategy that causes all Pokemon to faint at the end of 3 turns unless they switch out. With this, Yuki had found a way to make 2 different modes that normally have no overlap work together beautifully. But this pairing alone wasn't enough to really draw me into Yuki's concept. In fact, what really got me so interested in the idea wasn't even a Pokemon that he had on the team. It was a Pokemon that he didn't have but would fit in so well: Flamigo. Flamigo was on the very first team I built for Scarlet and Violet. While its stats are mediocre at best, it has the unique ability Co-Star, which causes Flamigo to copy any stat boosts or drops its partner has when it enters the battlefield. This makes it the perfect partner for teams that set up a Pokemon to be super strong. When Scarlet and Violet released, I paired it with the Dondozo and Tatsugiri with Toxic Orb, with the idea being if you could make Tatsugiri faint while inside Dondozo's mouth, Dondozo would keep the stat boosts and Flamigo could switch in and copy them. It was a fun strategy, but very gimmicky, as it often required you to knock out 2 of your own Pokemon in order to pull it off. But Toxic Orb isn't the only way to make this strategy work. If Tatsugiri hears the Perish Song before Dondozo chomps down, it will maintain its Perish counter, meaning if Tatsugiri is still in Dondozo's mouth when its Perish counter hits 0, it will faint and allow you to send in a new Pokemon. Like, for example, a Pokemon that could copy all of Dondozo's stat boosts. Basically, to say it a little bit simpler, if I can time when I KO my own Pokemon, I'll be rewarded with 2 extremely powerful boosted Pokemon that are nearly impossible to stop. With the addition of a single new Pokemon, I could add an entirely new dimension for the team, making it even more threatening. But we're still over 2 months away from the tournament, and building a team this far in advance can often be fatal, as the strategies that are popular can change a lot in that much time. So I went to the wedding, rooted for my friends in Europe, and put Dondozo Flamigo out of my head, for now. But a few weeks later, I saw an opportunity to put this concept to the test. Pokemon was holding a global challenge, an online tournament that awards points used to qualify for Worlds or make it to Day 2 for the top finishers. With over 50,000 entrants, this tournament would be chock full of top players, and it would be a great opportunity to test if this concept actually works. The only thing was I didn't want to alert the public to this team, and using it on my main account would basically shine a spotlight on it. So I bought a new game, and in order to not stand out, I chose the name Michael. After making it through the first hour of the game and claiming the Terra Orb, Michael was ready for the tournament. Of course, I still had to flesh out the team. I decided to run max speed Dondozo in order to be faster than most Flutter Mane, Sash Tatsugiri with Helping Hand, speed boosting Flutter Mane with some bulk but a good bit of special attack, and a standard Perish Trap Gothitelle. But then I ran into a problem. I knew I wanted Flamigo, but I had no idea how to use it. It's a weird Pokemon, and the item and moves it wants really wasn't obvious to me. But the global challenge was fast approaching, and I didn't have time to figure it out myself. So I decided to reach out to Carson Confer. Carson and I share something. We both won the World Championships in 2016, with Carson winning in the middle-age division. I knew Carson had brought Flamigo to several events this year, so I decided to ask him for advice on Flamigo's moves and items. Now, Carson and I have never worked together before, so I was expecting a simple answer in terms of what he thought was best. But to my surprise, Carson sent me a ton of great information detailing lots of extra context on Flamigo that was incredibly helpful. With Carson's experience, I felt I had a much better idea of how to use Flamigo, and I locked in a clear amulet set with Roost. I now only needed one more Pokemon on my team, and after a lot of consideration, I decided on Ting Lu. It's a super strong, bulky Pokemon that can use the niche move Sand Tomb, which traps the opponent on the field and does damage over time. It pairs really well with Yawn, Encore, Disable, and Perish Song. And I liked that with Terra Poison Ting Lu, I could beat opposing Flutter Manes, which are a problem for Perish Trap, as their ghost typing prevents them from being trapped in. While almost every Ting Lu at the time used Assault Vest, I gave mine a Lumberry, to protect it against Sleep and Burn, and to allow my Ting Lu to carry Protect, which I think every Pokemon should have when a team can win with Perish Song. And with that, I had a team of 6. I wasn't sure exactly what to expect going into the global challenge. It's not uncommon that a team will sound really great in theory and then just kind of collapse when you go to practice with it. And this tends to happen more the weirder your team is. To my surprise, I found out quickly that this team was the real deal. It wasn't perfect and it certainly wasn't complete, but I was able to beat so many players without any issues with Flamigo alone. And I could beat even more players thanks to my expertise with Perish Trap. Having 2 different modes that tried to win the game in completely different ways was extremely difficult for my opponents to handle. After a weekend full of games, I finished in the top 8 out of over 50,000 players, winning far more games than I lost, and several of those losses were to a turn 1 fissure connecting. I was honestly shocked. I'd done way better than I was expecting. There's 2 weeks until the next global challenge, and I can refine and use an even better version of the team there. And that means the first thing I need to do is update my EV spreads. As a quick explanation, each Pokemon has stats that can be influenced with skill points called effort values, or EVs for short. And these EVs play a huge role in what a Pokemon does. Because you're limited in how many you get, you're constantly trying to find the perfect distribution to balance between offense, defense, and speed. And with 6 potential stats to invest in, this is one of the most difficult technical skills in all of competitive Pokemon. Luckily, I'm pretty decent at it. But even luckier for me is that I'm friends with Dylan, who's one of the best when it comes to making good EV spreads. I asked Dylan to take a look at the team, and he sent back a far more refined version based on the criteria I asked for. But fixing the EV spreads isn't the only work I have to do. This had been my first attempt at the team, and there were things that were obvious weaknesses. First, I never clicked Helping Hand on Tatsugiri. More importantly, it felt like when I brought Tatsugiri to the battle, it never contributed anything on its own. It was just there to faint inside Dondozo's mouth. This doesn't sit right with me, as having a Pokemon whose only job is to faint just feels like a waste. A big risk of this team is losing Tatsugiri before Dondozo hits the field. If this happens when you're using the Flamigo mode, you pretty much lose on the spot. So I started thinking about how I could improve Tatsugiri's contribution without risking throwing up every single time I attacked with it. What if I maxed out Tatsugiri's bulk and gave it a Rosalie Berry to allow it to survive 3 hits from most Pokemon instead of 2? This could create situations in which Tatsugiri wasn't under the threat of being knocked out, even if my opponent calls my play. And what if, instead of Helping Hand, I run Taunt? This would help a lot versus Amoonguss, who at the moment can make my life hard with both Spore and Clear Smog. There's a problem though. Muddy Water is an inaccurate move, and also if I want to invest in my bulk, I have to drop Special Attack. Tatsugiri's move pool is really shallow, so I wasn't sure what other options I even had, but then I found something. Chilling Water. It's a weak 50 base power move that never misses, but always drops the target's attack stat. I can use this move to help keep Tatsugiri alive for longer, and the less time Tatsugiri spends in danger of being KO'd, the longer I can wait before sending out Dondozo, letting the perish counter drop before combining. This is good because Tatsugiri's health doesn't matter as long as it's above 0, and Dondozo's health matters a lot because you're often playing with 2 Pokemon against 4 by the time the setup is complete. This allows Tatsugiri to better support the team in general, as it can reduce the damage from powerful physical attackers such as Chen Pao, while also having a reliable move that never misses, which is great for finishing off low HP targets. Tinglu, Dondozo, and Gothitelle were good, and I didn't feel a need to make changes beyond EV spreads. While I could tell Flamigo wasn't perfect yet, it was strong enough that I didn't need to make any changes just yet, which just leaves Fluttermane. I realized I was pretty much only using it to set Perish Song, and I almost never clicked Shadow Ball or Moonblast. On top of that, being frail meant Fluttermane often went down early into the battle, which is a problem because then Dondozo would be forced out even earlier than I wanted. But even with a clever EV spread, Fluttermane's always going to be frail due to its base stats. If only there were a way I could make it bulkier. Wait. If Fluttermane is only on the team to use Perish Song, then why am I even using Fluttermane in the first place? Why not use my personal favorite Gen 9 Pokemon and extremely bulky Perish Song user, Screamtail? I tried it out and the difference was night and day. The bulk made it so much more difficult to get off the field, but that's not all. Screamtail learns a whole host of great supporting moves, and 2 in particular caught my eye: Encore and Disable. Encore forces the target to use the same move over and over again, whereas Disable prevents them from using the last move they used. And using one after the other causes an opponent to struggle. Disable is also great on its own, since you can stop any Pokemon holding a choice item from attacking, and you can also turn off the more threatening attacks from your opponent, whereas Encore can be used to force an opponent to keep using a defensive move, a setup option, or a not very effective attack. Having both gave me great options against Clear Smog Amoonguss and Haze Pokemon in general. And with that, version 2 of the team is complete. Well, almost. Flamigo just didn't feel like the best version of itself possible, but because so much of Flamigo's success is tied to whether or not the setup went off properly, it's really hard to tell if the specific EV spread and item were actually optimal. If only there was someone who knew a little bit more about Flamigo. Carson and I had kept chatting throughout the last global challenge, as he didn't think Flamigo could work in the newest rule set. So I reached out, and Carson, intrigued to see how I'd made Flamigo work, came on board. The first thing Carson did was push us to add more bulk on Flamigo. We'd been running max speed and attack, but Carson pointed out that Flamigo benefited a lot more from the survivability compared to just raw power. And in talking about Flamigo, reviewing replays, and testing matchups, I realized a better item that we could use: safety goggles. With Terra Steel and safety goggles, Flamigo becomes completely immune to Amoonguss, which is a big deal because Flamigo's Brave Bird has a ton of recoil when used against Amoonguss. And a clever player can use that to force you to trade Flamigo for Amoonguss, which you often don't want to do. And just like that, the 2-week period was up, and it was time for the next global challenge. This one didn't go as well as the previous one. The format is best of 1, and players often run strategies centered around surprising their opponents, which makes these tournaments very volatile. I still finished in the top 64 out of 50,000 players, but more importantly than my finish, the team felt amazing. Most of the losses came from situations where we were caught off guard by something completely unstandard, a risk we wouldn't have to worry about in the open team sheet format of Nationals. And I realized something. This team was the culmination of my entire season's hard work. It had Flamigo from the first team I ever built, Dondozo and Tatsugiri from my first official tournament team in San Diego, Screamtail from Orlando Regionals, which I won, Gothitelle from Knoxville Regionals, and Tinglu from my Hartford Regional team. Nationals will effectively be the final tournament of Scarlet and Violet's first year, since Worlds this year uses a completely different format. And this team was my way of taking everything I'd learned throughout the year and putting it to the test. Months and months of hard work all packaged together neatly in one Flamigo-centric team. Carson and I continued to work on the team over the next 2 weeks with Yuki's help, but suddenly I found myself in hot water. If you're a regular viewer of this channel, you might have watched my video about the Hartford Regional Championships, a tournament where I finished 3rd despite being very unprepared. A big part of my journey throughout that video was about me finding a team under ridiculous time constraints. Less than a week before the tournament, I hadn't had any idea what I wanted to use. Did you ever wonder why I let it get so close to the tournament without finding so much as a starting point? It wasn't that I was lazy, it was that I was working on something bigger. And I certainly wasn't going to bring this team to Hartford. It has the potential to win Nationals, and the element of surprise will be crucial to giving it the best shot. Using it in advance would let people prepare against it, making game plans or even changing their team. I need to keep it a secret if I want the best chance of winning Nationals, so I had to make a new team. And I built one that was honestly pretty good, but I already made that video, so let's move on. The only other thing I want to show you about Hartford is this.
So we're going to be sending it to a short break when we get our top 8. Oh?
Do you guys like these are flamingo socks. Can they see? I can't believe I didn't say anything. These are my Flamigo socks. Excuse me.
They the lucky socks?
They are now, yeah. Anyway, you can sign off, sorry.
Maybe this is dumb, but I wanted to throw in a little Easter egg on stream, so I made sure to wear the Flamigo socks. Even though Hartford went way better than I expected, and I managed to finish 3rd, which would be a good enough finish at Nationals to get me day 2, the difference between the Hartford team and the Flamigo team was stark. The Flamigo team just felt so much better. And now there's no more tournaments before Nationals, which means it's time to refine the team to its final form. Carson and I continued tweaking the EV spreads of the team, with Carson pushing our Screamtail to become faster and faster. My good friend Marcus asked to use the team as well, and helped us to test specific matchups and game plans. More than anything else though, we spent this time practicing. Normally, players practice using a simulator called Pokémon Showdown, which lets you play games way faster. But since this is where most Americans were practicing for the event, using it would be really risky. Battle Stadium, the in-game ladder, is mostly made up of Japanese players. So that's where Carson and I played. Between the two of us, we played over 200 games, and we'd often do group laddering sessions together as well. We also played best of 3s against friends we trusted, with Aaron Zhang, Aaron Trailer, and Brendan Zhang giving great in-game practice sets that we were able to record and review turn by turn. By the way, I literally have like hours and hours of footage recorded from all these practice sessions that I'm not really planning on posting anywhere. I was thinking about maybe at some point opening up a Patreon to post a bunch of stuff, including some of these like behind the scenes practice sets. So let me know if that's something you all would be interested in. After playing so many games though, we discovered a couple of problematic matchups. one being Mousehold and Annihilate, and the other being Goldengo. We ran sets against these, trying to figure out what to do and what could be changed. Over the course of laddering, I continued to win game after game after game. And before I knew it, Michael became the #1 ranked player in Scarlet and Violet with a huge lead over the #2 ranked player. I also played a few games on Showdown each day just to try and keep an eye on the metagame and make sure we were abreast of any new developments. But after I realized it was taking forever to find an opponent, I opened up the ladder and to my shock, found myself at rank 1. Without realizing it, I'd become the #1 ranked player on both Showdown and Battle Stadium at the same time. I switched to my Hartford team and quickly tanked my rating, hoping that nobody had seen. And it seemed like it had worked. Days passed and nobody seemed to care who the mysterious Squash Eater was. I breathed a sigh of relief and went back to the safety of Battle Stadium. Or so I thought. During one game against a Japanese player, I was playing incredibly well. Perhaps a little bit too well. Little did I know, this Japanese player was streaming, and there was one single American who happened to be watching the stream. Let's call him Paul. Paul became very interested in who Michael was, a high-ranking American on the ladder that he'd never heard of before using a totally unique team. It was pretty obvious that Michael was likely someone else. And so Paul began his search for the mysterious Michael. And after enough time, he managed to link the account back to me. Michael's secret identity was secret no longer. Paul only told a few friends that he'd found my secret nationals team. But those few friends told a few friends, who told a few friends, who eventually told a player with their hands in nearly every major friend group in the scene. And that player sent the team to all of them. And so it came to be that the Monday before Nationals, I received a DM from a friend. Hey man, your team is out there. Every single group knows about it and they're preparing for it. I'm sorry. Over the next few days, Carson and I received DM after DM about our team and the reaction it was causing. It was mass panic on a level I've never seen before in the competitive scene. Players with refined Nationals teams that they thought could win were suddenly faced with a matchup where they couldn't do a single thing. Every top player attending the event dropped whatever they were doing and started trying to find a way to beat my team. Every single one played sets against it, developing game plans and practicing over and over again. Many players changed their teams to have a better matchup, adding Clear Smog onto Amoonguss or making other favorable changes. And some players even stole the team and brought it themselves to Nationals, such as Brady Smith, who was put on the stream the round before I was at Nationals, with onlookers lauding him for such a cool, creative team. None of this is against the rules. However, I personally think that it is unbelievably lame. In my experience, top players fall into one of two categories: players who want to win the tournament and players who want to be the best. Most players fall into the former category, and so they obsess over things like scouting, trying to glean every little advantage they can. Getting gifted one of the top teams before the tournament is like striking gold for them, as they can gain a massive advantage that they wouldn't otherwise have. But for players who want to be the best, it's different. I personally do not care what team my competitors are bringing to an event. I intend to beat them regardless of the team they have because I am the better player. I do want to say that I don't think that Paul, who was the start of this whole thing, acted maliciously. I would be shocked if he saw how far his actions would reach, and equally shocked if he'd done any part of what he did to hurt me intentionally. Unfortunately, his actions did cause both Carson and my odds of winning the tournament to plummet. While not every detail of the leaked team was correct, we'd completely lost the element of surprise. The panic opponents feel when seeing Flamigo for the first time and realizing they don't have a single practice game against it could have won sets on its own. Worse, every top player now has experience versus my team, whereas I don't have experience against their specific versions, even if they're standard. And on top of all of that, having your team leaked is a horrible, horrible feeling. Watching it spread, knowing you're powerless to stop it, everything about it just feels so incredibly unjust. And the worst part is, I was careful. I practiced on a secret alt in a place where my competitors weren't even playing. I didn't bring the team to a crucial tournament even though I didn't have anything else to use. I worked so hard for months on something I was so proud of, all for it to be taken from me 4 days before the tournament. For my entire career, players have been obsessed with finding my teams before the event. I've been doxxed before and had my Facebook hacked, all in order for my competitors to try and find my teams. It even already happened this season, where my competitors stole my Orlando team and then published it online, with many of them bringing it to the tournament and finding success. You think I'd be used to it by now, but I'm not. It feels so deflating to have it happen, and it always feels so personal. This doesn't happen to any other top player, but because I'm a world champion and I have a big online presence and my teams are so unique, it happens to me all the time. And so, days before the biggest, most important tournament of the season thus far, I have to handle the biggest leak I've ever dealt with. Carson and I need to decide what we're gonna do. Should we make major changes? Should we pivot away from the team? Without talking about it first, we both agree. We are former world champions. We intend to win the tournament because we are the best player of the tournament. Having the element of surprise would make things easier, but I don't need things to be easy in order to win, which means we have to make use of these final 3 days before Nationals. We have 2 problematic matchups: Mousehold Annihilate and Gholdengo. Mousehold can boost Annihilape's Rage Fist to ridiculous levels, causing it to do absurd damage to our entire team, and we don't have a way to stop it from getting set up. On top of that, Mousehold's Terra Ghost and Annihilape's Real Ghost means we can't use Fake Out or Perish Song to stop them. Gholdengo is also a ghost type that is immune to Encore, Disable, Yawn, and Perish Song, and can set up Nasty Plot while we're trying to get Flamigo in, or just output huge damage on its own. We're running out of time when I have an idea. Currently, we have Terra Steel on Tatsugiri, but we almost never use it. What if we ran Terra Normal? It wouldn't help versus Gholdengo, but it might be useful against Annihilape's Rage Fist. Carson and I test it with the help of some friends, and it gives us another tool, so we lock it in. And just like that, prep time is over. Months of hard work, all leading up to this one chance. 4th place or better to achieve my goal. The entire competitive community practicing against my team. I faced better odds. And yet, stepping off the plane in Columbus, Ohio, I don't feel stressed. I feel determined. I came here to win. But in order to do that, I need to make it past day 1. There's 9 rounds today, and I need to win 7 of them to advance. And winning more than that makes winning the entire tournament so much easier. My round 1 opponent has a team that uses Murkrow as the key support Pokemon, with both Tailwind for speed control and Sunny Day to boost its teammates' damage output. Game 1 goes smoothly, as I use Screamtail to disable Choice Scarf Great Tusk while trapping it in with Gothitelle, forcing it to struggle. From there, I predict Fluttermane to switch in and KO it with Ting-Lu, and with only Murkrow and Amoonguss left, I easily win. Game 2, I switch modes completely, this time going with the Flamigo strategy, and though my opponent plays well, they don't have anything to stop the boosted bird. I win both games and the set. Round 2 is versus another weather-centric team, this time with Tyranitar, Lycanroc, and Sandvale Garchomp. I open Game 1 with Ting-Lu and Dondozo, one of my personal favorite pairings. In Game 1, I see an opportunity to trap Tyranitar and Garchomp on the field and pull off a Perish Song early in the game, leaving them with only Fluttermane and Iron Bundle, who quickly fall against Ting-Lu and Dondozo. In Game 2, I once again switch to the Flamigo mode, and my opponent brought 4 Pokemon that get one-hit KO'd by Flamigo. I pull off the setup and win the game. Round 3 is against Raghav Malavia, the player who would eventually make it to the finals of the tournament. He's also the first opponent who I know for a fact heard about the leak. I don't know how much practice he has against my team, or whether or not he changed his team to match up better against mine, so this has potential to go really badly. Raghav's team is another different type of weather team, featuring Pelipper and Palafin alongside Amoonguss, Iron Hands, Fluttermane, and Arcanine. Game 1 starts with Raghav's Fluttermane and Iron Hands against my Ting-Lu and Screamtail. Raghav switches Fluttermane into Amoonguss turn 1 as I tear it a poison with Ting-Lu, protecting Screamtail and heavy slamming Amoonguss and eating a Drain Punch in return. This Iron Hands has Volt Switch, so I can't go for a Perish Trap just yet, but that doesn't mean I don't have any options. I encore the Iron Hands into Drain Punch and hit it with a Sand Tomb, as they spore my Screamtail and are forced to Drain Punch for a small amount of damage. I use Sand Tomb to trap both, and eventually KO Amoonguss. Volt Switch lets Raghav send out Fluttermane, and Amoonguss fainting lets Baby Palafin hit the board. Fearing a heavy slam, Raghav immediately switches Fluttermane back into Iron Hands, but I protect both, scouting this out. And now, finally, it's time to go for the trap. I switch Ting-Lu into Gothitelle as Raghav goes for Fake Out and Wave Crash into Screamtail, but it survives with about 50 HP. I use Encore to lock both his Pokemon into weak moves, and Ragov forfeits, knowing the game is lost. Now, Ragov's Palafin has Haze, which means I can only go for the Flamigo mode if I hard read that Ragov isn't going to bring Palafin. That feels a little too risky, given I think I can win without Flamigo in the first place, so for game 2, I decide to stick with the Perish mode. But in hopes of immediately trapping in Palafin, who was kinda useless last game, I pick a risky lead of Gothitelle and Screamtail. But my plan backfires, as Ragov leads with Iron Hands and Flutter Mane, which is a much worse lead matchup for me than last game. I'm forced to protect both my Pokemon, with the hope of using Disable next turn on the Specs Flutter Mane, but Ragov doesn't give me the chance. He uses Volt Switch into his own Flutter Mane, letting him bring out Amoonguss. I make a risky move, going for Perish Song and Psychic, hoping Ragov will switch out Flutter Mane, but he stays in and goes for Shadow Ball and Spore into the Screamtail, leaving it with low HP and fast asleep. I switch to Tinglu and Protect, but Ragov makes another great play, doubling that slot again with Spore and Shadow Ball, getting a crucial special defense drop and burning my Lumberry. This is getting bad fast, but I see a way out. I switch Gothitelle to Screamtail, sacrificing it to a Shadow Ball as I Sand Tomb Amoonguss. Unfortunately, Spore hits my Tinglu and I'm forced to take a nap. I send Gothitelle back out, and because Flutter Mane's Perish counter is at 1, I can fake out Amoonguss safely as Ragov switches to Iron Hands and the Perish Song takes out Amoonguss. This relieves a little pressure, but I'm still pretty far behind, and I need to make a prediction to turn this game around. Tinglu is the main threat I have, so even though Gothitelle is super vulnerable, I call that Ragov is going to double attack Tinglu. I Terrastalize to Poison as Ragov Terrastalizes to Fairy, and thanks to the special defense drop, Choice Specs Moonblast does a ton of damage. But I hit Tinglu with a Heal Pulse, recovering 50% of my health. Iron Hands wild charges Tinglu, but thanks to the Heal Pulse, I survive. And Tinglu wakes up after only 1 turn of sleep. This is massive because the move I chose is Stomping Tantrum, which doubles in power if Tinglu's last move failed, including if it failed due to being fast asleep. Thanks to this, Stomping Tantrum KOs Iron Hands in 1 hit, and suddenly, I'm in the lead 3 Pokemon against 2. I switch Gothitelle to Dondozo, but Tinglu survives Moonblast and Wave Crash with exactly 5 HP, and Heavy Slam KOs Flutter Mane. Left with only Baby Palafin, Ragov forfeits and I win the set.
Winning against another player who is also in the day 2 race is really, really good. That was kind of the first more standard composition that I've played against so far, and so being able to not only win 2-0, but more or less pretty cleanly felt really good. I feel like game 1 I'm really proud of, and game 2 I made a lot of mistakes early on. I think I led the wrong Pokemon without a doubt. I don't think my early turns were very good. I was very predictable. Letting a bunch of my Pokemon fall asleep was really bad, but I capitalized by recognizing the crucial turn where I needed to make a prediction. I made the right prediction and then was able to turn it around with some good luck. So overall feeling really, really solid at this point, but we're still super early in the day, so I have a long ways to go before I can really feel safe.
Afterwards, Ragov said that he'd practiced against the team, but didn't think that I'd have both Encore and Disable. In other words, practicing against the wrong version of the team had affected how he thought about the matchup. Feeling bolstered by this information and the win, I move on to round 4. It's against an Indeedee and Armarouge player, but I have plenty of tools to handle them. I win in 2 quick games. 4 rounds in and I haven't dropped a single game. But that'll change with round 5, an absolutely abysmal matchup. My opponent has Orthworm, a Pokemon who basically takes no damage from my Tinglu, Dondozo, Screamtail, and Gothitelle, who also can't be trapped in thanks to its Shed Tail attack. On top of that, Flamigo is out of the question because the Chien-Pao has Haze, as well as Terra Ghost and Throat Chop, which stops Perish Song. They also have Booster Energy Flutter Mane, a much more threatening version than the Specs version that I can use Disable against, and Dragon Dance Dragonite. This is going to be very hard. In game 1, my opponent leads off with Orthworm and Iron Hands with Dragonite and Chien-Pao in the back. I'm able to gradually make my way through the team with Perish Song and eventually win against the Orthworm thanks to Dondozo and Tinglu narrowly outdamaging Orthworm and Chien-Pao. Game 2 goes worse, as with Terra Ghost Chien-Pao next to Dragonite, I'm taking a ton of damage with no easy way to get rid of things quickly. To make matters worse, my opponent left Iron Hands behind for Flutter Mane, which is much more threatening. I take a few KOs, but in the end, I can't match the damage, and I lose. Game 3, my opponent brings the same Pokemon again, and it's up to me to find a way to adjust. I'm almost able to pull off a Perish Trap, but I've let my Gothitelle take too much damage. It's in range of Chien-Pao's Throat Chop, and I just protected. I can go for the double protect, but 2/3 of the time, it'll fail and I'll lose. But I see a way out. My Screamtail is low HP, so I switch it in, sacrificing it and letting me reset Gothitelle without giving up the trap. I take 2 KOs with Perish Song and somehow clean up the game.
Feeling okay, that was the first game 3 of the day, but it was really, really tough. The presence of Haze and Terra Ghost and Throat Chop on Chen Pao was just really, really hard, and though I won, it was a lot closer than I would have liked it to be. I had to make aggressive predictions and basically lay a trap and have it pay off. So even though I won, I feel like this next round, I really need to just win round 6 cleanly so I can just keep momentum up and have some time to rest, because I have to run right back inside for the next round.
With 5 wins and 0 losses, things are going well, but I still have 4 rounds left today, and my next opponent is a veteran player with a weird team. He has Armarouge and Indeedee, but unlike the one I played earlier, this one has a weakness policy and weak armor, intending to be a fast sweeper instead of a trick room one. They open up with Fluttermane and Talonflame, and I win game 1 quickly, taking out Fluttermane with Heavy Slam and then KOing Armarouge and Indeedee with Perish Song. Game 2 is a bit harder, as they use Garchomp to do a ton of damage early, and I'm forced to let both my Pokemon faint in exchange for a double KO on Indeedee and Garchomp. Thankfully, I have Dondozo and Ting-Lu in the back against their Talonflame and Armarouge, and thanks to Yawn, I'm able to win. One more win and I'll make it to tomorrow, but this next one will be on stream. I'm playing against the team players have been calling New Balance, the same 6 Pokemon that I brought to Hartford Regionals. The battle opens up with Gyarados and Fluttermane against my Ting-Lu and Screamtail. I protect Screamtail and Terrastallize Ting-Lu as they Dazzling Gleam and Taunt into my Protect. I figure there's no way they're gonna let me KO Fluttermane for free, so I switch to Gothitelle and Perish Song, anticipating a switch into Iron Hands or Amoonguss. But to my shock, they stay in and double attack my Screamtail. A terrible turn for me. I save Screamtail, switching it out for Ting-Lu as I fake out Gyarados and they Dazzling Gleam for a little chip. I protect Gothitelle, but they Thunder Wave my now Poison-type Ting-Lu, burning my Lumberry as I Sand Tomb Amoonguss for damage over time and a trap. I sacrifice Screamtail and protect Ting-Lu, letting the Perish counter KO Gyarados, and I send out Gothitelle as they send out Iron Hands. I fake out Amoonguss, but Iron Hands Swords Dances, and Screamtail being down means I can't deal with it with Perish Song or Encore. My double up into the Amoonguss drops it low, but it heals back up with Citrus Berry. Amoonguss terrestrializes to water in order to survive the Psychic, but Gothitelle survives the Thunder Punch, and just in case Amoonguss survived, I attack it with Ting-Lu's Stomping Tantrum, finishing it off and wasting my opponent's Terra. Fluttermane is sent out, and I switch Gothitelle into Dondozo, who feints to a Shadow Ball Thunder Punch double up, letting me KO Fluttermane with Heavy Slam, keeping me in the lead 2 against 1. With 2 super effective heavy hitters who both resist Drain Punch, I'm able to deal with Iron Hands, and I win game 1. I switched to the Flamigo mode for game 2, as it's actually pretty solid into this matchup. After protecting both turn 1, I go for Perish Song and Taunt as they switch to Fluttermane and fail Spore. Chiyu switches in and loses half of its health to Draco Meteor as Fluttermane Dazzling Gleams. I'm in a great spot. All I need to do is get Dondozo in and everything is set up to win the game. I switch to Dondozo and get crit. It was the only turn I was vulnerable with the Perish counter at 2, but it happens, and I lose the game on the spot. Now it's all down to game 3. I go back to the Perish mode from game 1, and my opponent opens up with Gyarados and Fluttermane once again. I make the same play as game 1, but this time my opponent waterfalls Ting-Lu instead of taunting Screamtail. I learned from my mistake game 1. Rather than predicting a switch, I go for a Perish Song and Heavy Slam into Fluttermane. And I see that, just like I expected, Fluttermane stayed in. I survive the Shadow Ball and Waterfall and flinch. If I don't flinch, I probably win the game on the spot. But suddenly, this looks way more dicey. I try and cheese a KO by disabling Waterfall, but Shadow Ball takes out Ting-Lu, and I'm down a Pokemon already. I go into Gothitelle and buy myself a turn by faking out Gyarados and switching to Dondozo, and eat a Dazzling Gleam for my trouble. I'm so far behind, I need to play aggressively, so I predict Amoonguss switching in and hit it with both a Yawn and a Psychic as Gyarados taunts my Gothitelle, and then feints to the Perish Song. I'm threatening to KO the Amoonguss with Wave Crash and Psychic, so my opponent terrestrializes to keep it safe as I Yawn the Iron Hands and Psychic Amoonguss. My opponent doubles Dondozo with Spore and Thunder Punch, but Amoonguss falls asleep thanks to the Yawn. I switch Dondozo to Screamtail and finally get a bit of luck, as Gothitelle's Psychic crits Amoonguss for the KO as Iron Hands Swords Dances and then falls asleep. I go for Protect and Perish Song as I know Screamtail will survive a critical hit Shadow Ball, but they target Gothitelle instead, wasting their attack. I switch to Dondozo and Encore Iron Hand. Even though it's asleep right now, I need to make sure it's locked into Swords Dance so it doesn't sweep through my whole team. Fluttermane takes out Dondozo as the Perish counter falls to 2. I Protect and disable Shadow Ball as Moonblast goes into the Protect and the Perish counter falls to 1. I go for a double Protect and fail, but because I disabled Shadow Ball, Gothitelle survives the Moonblast, and because I encored the Iron Hands, it can't go for a move to KO Gothitelle. The Perish counter falls to 0. Gothitelle remains the only Pokemon standing, and I win the set and I'm guaranteed to make it to tomorrow. But there's still 2 rounds left today, and I want to win them both. My next match is against Chuppa Cross, another player in the Day 2 race who I'm confident saw my leaked team. He'd actually played and beaten Brady Smith, the player who stole my team, on stream 2 rounds ago, but Brady didn't have the right version and also didn't know how to use the team. Unfortunately for me, Chuppa has a Goldengo, which is one of the worst matchups. I win game 1 by playing excellently, setting up a Perish Song the same turn I let Screamtail go down and then converting that into a win. But game 2, Chuppa adjusts and leads off with Goldengo and Chien-Pao instead of Dragonite and Chien-Pao, and my Screamtail lead is much worse. I flounder around a bit, but I end up losing. It's all down to game 3. I switch to a Dondozo and Ting-Lu lead against Chuppa's Chien-Pao and Goldengo, and I decide to make a read. This Goldengo is the biggest threat to my team, so I figured Chuppa's not going to let me KO it for free since I know he has Dragonite in the back. I decide to go for Order Up and Heavy Slam into the Chien-Pao, predicting Goldengo to switch to Dragonite, but Chuppa switches Chien-Pao to Dragonite instead. I do good damage, but Goldengo tricks my Dondozo, giving it choice specs and stealing leftovers. I make a risky move, bringing in Tatsugiri while I'm already locked into Order Up, and I take out Dragonite. Iron Bundle comes in, but I'm able to take it out by terastallizing my red HP Dondozo to survive a Freeze Dry. By the time Dondozo goes down, I'm up 3 against 2. I go into Screamtail and I set up a Perish Song, but I overpredict and leave Tatsugiri vulnerable and it goes down. It's a 2v2 with Chien-Pao and Screamtail on the Perish counter. It all comes down to whether or not Goldengo survives a Stomping Tantrum with Chien-Pao's Sword of Ruin active. I go for it and it lives on 1 HP. Despite Chien-Pao fainting to Perish Song, Goldengo takes out Ting-Lu, and I narrowly lose game 3.
Yeah, so I just lost round 8, feeling a little bit bad about it just because, like, my opponent played super well, but I just feel like I didn't really have a good big picture awareness. And I can, like, feel my exhaustion catching up to me. I can feel my play slipping, so I'm just pretty worried going into the last round. It was, like, game 3, like, this Pokemon looked super low HP, so, like, it was really close, but I just wish I'd, like, closed that out, and then, yeah, I'm a little worried given how I'm playing that, like, the last round might be difficult, so... yeah, I just really want to win this last one and be in a good shape going into tomorrow.
I need to win this last one if I want to have any wiggle room tomorrow at all. I'm playing against Trista, one of the first friends I made when I started playing VGC. Something about going up against a friend just takes the edge off for me, and I'm able to breathe a little easier. She has a team with Fissure Dondozo, which is very scary, and she's already played Carson today, though he was able to win. Game 1 goes smoothly. I KO her Chien-Pao turn 1 with a double attack and get her Fluttermane turn 2 by switching in Tatsugiri and Wave Crashing. From here, I'm up 4 against 2 and I can continually yawn Trista's Pokemon, taking out Dragonite with Order Up and eventually winning the game. Game 2 is a lot harder. We both lead off with Ting-Lu and Dondozo, but I think I have the advantage since I have Sand Tomb. I want to limit Trista's ability to click Fissure, so I launch a Sand Tomb and Yawn at her Dondozo as she Ruinations my Ting-Lu and Yawns my Dondozo. I switch into Screamtail and Protect, blocking a Yawn, but Trista has Whirlwind and uses it on her own Dondozo, freeing it from Sand Tomb, preventing Yawn from taking effect, and sending out her Chien-Pao. I Encore Whirlwind and Terra Ting-Lu to Poison as they Ice Spinner Ting-Lu and Whirlwind sends Screamtail into Gothitelle. I switch Dondozo in for Ting-Lu, who takes the Ice Spinner very well, and launch a Psychic into the Dark-type Chien-Pao. But Chien-Pao terastallizes to Ghost, which is exactly what I was hoping for. Trista's forced to Whirlwind once again, this time sending Gothitelle back out to Screamtail. She sends out Dondozo to replace the fainted Chien-Pao. From here, I have a Pokemon lead and I see a way to win. I eventually force Trista out of Ting-Lu, getting her to have both Chi-Yu and Dondozo on the field together. I Perish Song and let her KO Ting-Lu, letting me bring Gothitelle in safely with Perish already active. From here, all I need to do is waste a few turns and suddenly I'm up 3 against 1. Dindozo and Gothitelle clean up the game, and I win the set, ending the first day of competition with 8 wins and 1 loss.
I've just wrapped up day 1. Very exhausted, but I'm really happy because I went 8-1 and Carson went 9-0, which I think, given we were the two who put the most time into the team, is a really strong finish. Personal goal was to go 8-1 or 9-0 today, just to make tomorrow a little bit easier. So yeah, I'm really proud of that, especially given fatigue definitely caught up to me. After that long stream set, going right into another 3-game set in a row, I was really worried that I wouldn't have the mental fortitude to kind of clutch out and play well. But if I'd gone from 7-0 to 7-2, I think I'd be really frustrated with myself. So being 8-1 basically means that I can afford 1 loss tomorrow, which is just so much nicer. I mean, ideally I get no losses, but whenever you go to a tournament, no matter how much work you put in, no matter how good you feel, there's always a chance that you're not going to do that well, that you won't even make it to day 2. I think every competitive player knows that. So yeah, to not only make it to day 2, but do it with only 1 loss, I'm really proud of that, and I'm really hopeful that I can make top 8 tomorrow.
We're in amazing shape for tomorrow, with me needing to win 4 games and Carson only 3 out of the 5. We grab some dinner with friends, talk about our problem matchups, and hit the hay. Out of the nearly 800 players who started the tournament, only around 60 remain. After 5 more rounds, the best 8 players will advance to a final elimination bracket. I might make it in if I win 3 out of my 5 rounds today, but 4 wins guarantees it. And thankfully, my first round is against New Balance, the team I have a ton of experience against. I win game 1 almost immediately thanks to a turn 1 crit, and I win game 2 without too much issue as well. 4 rounds left, and I need to win 3 of them. But round 11 is against Chuppa Cross, my only loss from yesterday. And it's like deja vu. I win game 1 and lose game 2. And the turn 1 of game 3 is the exact same, with me doubling Chen Pao as it switches to Dragonite. Unlike last time, my Dindozo didn't get tricked, and I'm in a good position to sweep when Extreme Speed lands a critical hit on my boosted Dindozo, completely eliminating the option. Without Dindozo, I can't win, and my Pokemon fall one after another. Not only did I lose again, I also was the very last match to finish of the entire round, which means I don't get a break before the next match. And my heart sinks when I see who I'm going up against. Leonard Kraft, a good friend of mine, but he has Mousehold and Annihilate, the team I have the worst matchup against in the entire tournament. I'm not recovered from my last set at all, and it shows. Game 1 starts out okay, with my Terranormal Tatsugiri getting around Leonard's Rage Fist and taunting the Mousehold. I decide to get a little greedy on turn 2, trying to Draco Meteor Mousehold as I figure it'll switch out, and I've EV'd my Tatsugiri to survive Annihilate's Drain Punch even while I'm a normal type. But I forget that Leonard has a different variant of this team than normal. He has Chen Pao in the last slot, which lowers Tatsugiri's defense. Chen Pao comes in, Tatsugiri drops the Drain Punch, and I lose the game immediately. I'm now down a game in my worst matchup, and I'm totally drained. I need to find some way of pulling it together. I switch up the Pokemon I bring, starting off with Dindozo and Ting Lu. It's something I thought could work in practice. Leonard goes for a beat up and bulk up turn 1, but I yawn the Annihilate and Sand Tomb the Mousehold. I predict him to switch turn 2, and he brings in Chen Pao. Thanks to the Sword of Ruin, Mousehold faints to a Wave Crash, and Ting Lu drops Chen Pao to red with Heavy Slam. We both position our Screamtails in, but Leonard makes a smart prediction and forces me to give up my Tatsugiri to keep my Screamtail alive. Thankfully, I'm able to use Ting Lu to take out Screamtail, and with only 2 Pokemon left, I can win with Perish Song. I've brought us to a game 3. I lead off with Dindozo and Ting Lu once again, but Leonard does something I've never seen before. Talonflame and Mousehold lead. He burns my Dindozo right away, removing a crucial source of damage and invalidates both my moves. He then brings in Annihilate and uses Beat Up on it, and though I yawn the switch and Sand Tomb the Mousehold, this isn't a good position by any means. Leonard repositions, and though I take out Mousehold, Yawn wasn't able to put anything to sleep. We both fight for a winning position, me trying to stop his Annihilate and Leonard trying to stop my Perish Song. Unfortunately, my own Perish Song forces me to switch out my Screamtail, and that means I'll no longer be faster than his Annihilate in Tailwind. But I see a way out. I sacrifice most of Dindozo's HP for a yawn on Annihilate. Now, Annihilate has to make a choice. If it stays in, it'll fall asleep, but if it switches, I get to KO the low HP Talonflame. Leonard switches, and suddenly I'm up 4 against 2. I sacrifice Ting Lu to get Screamtail in, but this game is so close. I'm not sure I'll have the health left to stall out the Perish Song. I see an option. I switch Tatsugiri into Dondozo, intending to sacrifice it, and I go for a Perish Song. And though Drain Punch takes it out, it did its job. Perish Song is up and Tatsugiri is alive. I Terastallize Tatsugiri to normal and I Encore Annihilate into Rage Fist. And suddenly, Annihilate, the nightmare Pokemon, the centerpiece of Leonard's team that does infinite damage, can't do any damage to Tatsugiri. Screamtail's Dazzling Gleam is not adding up fast enough either. The Perish counter falls to 3, 2, 1. And every Pokemon on the field faints except for the small fish with a giant jewel on its head. But once again, I'm the last set to finish. I barely have time to get a drink of water before the next round goes up, and my heart sinks. I'm playing another Goldango. This one, the much more problematic version with Nasty Plot and Leftovers with Terra Water and Grimmsnarl support. I have almost no tools for this matchup, but I'll need to find a way to win. This was, unfortunately, the unluckiest set of the season for me. The amount of flinches, crits, misses, and paralyses that happened made the game almost unplayable for me, and rather than recount it and seem like I'm complaining a lot, we're just gonna kind of skim over this one. My opponent also didn't know that Taunt didn't work on my Oblivious Dondozo, which actually ended up winning them a game. I lose game 1 narrowly after being basically unable to move at all, but I build a better game plan for game 2. In game 1, they used Grimmsnarl and Gyarados to slow me down in the middle of the game, so I'll bring Perish Trap and KO these two defensive Pokemon with that, then win with Dondozo and Ting Lu. It's all going swell until Gothitelle gets fully paralyzed on a Fake Out, allowing Grimmsnarl to Thunder Wave Screamtail, allowing Gyarados to taunt Screamtail, preventing Perish Song. And suddenly, I don't see a way I can still win. Well, I do see one way. I can win on timer. I stall, gradually whittling down my opponent's Pokemon, but in the end, there is exactly one turn too many. If I'd been able to waste 45 more seconds somewhere during the game, I could have done it, but in the end, I'm behind when time runs out, and I lose the set. I'm so frustrated, but when I look at the score so far, I see something. My resistance, the tiebreaker that will determine who makes the final 8 players, is the best out of anyone with 3 losses. That means if I win the last round, I probably still make it in. But once again, I'm one of the final matches to finish because both games took so long. And my final opponent is yet another Mousehold Annihilate player. And unlike Leonard, this player definitely was well aware of the leak. I wouldn't be surprised if they practiced games against my team before the event. I decided to go with Ting Lu and Dondozo instead of the Flamigo mode. Both modes work, but I'm just more comfortable with Perish. But I'm just out of juice. This matchup is too difficult, and I'm making mistakes. I lose game 1 and make back-to-back horrible moves in game 2 in a matchup where I really couldn't afford any mistakes. And without taking a game, I lose the set.
With that, I'm out of the tournament. I'm really disappointed, honestly. I feel like my prep was so good, everything was going so well, and yesterday went so well. So to go from 8-1 to 10-4, I'm really disappointed. Pokemon's a game about getting back up when you get knocked down, but yeah, this definitely stings. So I'm out of the day 2 race. We'll have to go through Worlds day 1. It's just one tournament. I think overall I still did well. I'm just waiting here right now, actually, if Carson makes it into the top 8. I really hope that he does and he can do the team justice, but I think it was still a super strong team and a super good tournament. I think I just kind of ran out of juice towards the end, unfortunately.
One more win and I'd have made it. I was the best ranked player out of everyone who got 10 wins, landing me a 19th place finish, my worst performance of the season. And Carson, despite getting one more win, missed out based on the tiebreaker, finishing 10th when he needed 8th. So now that it's been a few weeks, how do I feel about how things went? First, I think the leak was ultimately the difference maker here. I know for a fact that 3 of my 4 losses were against players who benefited from it, and losing the element of surprise in sets that ended up being nail-biters was probably the difference. So even though it was my worst finish of the year, I still think that this team was something special, and I think if just a couple things had gone differently, I totally could have won this tournament. Unfortunately, this means that I missed out on getting the bye to skip the entire first day of the World Championships. And like I already told you, only one player has ever managed to win the World Championships after starting in day 1. Thankfully, that player was me. And this year, I'm ready to do it again. I'll see you at the World Championships.